Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into an absolutely incredible chapter of American history. We're talking about how a marginalized community in the deeply segregated South built a grassroots entertainment network, literally against all odds, that ended up birthing modern popular music. It's this wild story of hustle, danger, brilliant entrepreneurship, and just absolute musical genius. Okay, let's kick things off with a staggering number. 14 million. Back in the early 1920s, that was the estimated population of African Americans in the U.S., with most living right in the South. And, crazy enough, major record executives were completely ignoring them. They honestly didn't think there was a dime to be made there. Well, that is, until one pitch from a music manager named Perry Bradford used this exact number to wake up the whole industry, and it literally changed music history forever.
Section 1. Roots of the Blues.
Now, to wrap our heads around this massive cultural shift, we've got to go back to the raw ingredients. So, the term blues, it actually traces back to the 1600s, this old phrase, blue devils, meaning evil spirits that brought on depression. But fast forward to the post-Civil War South. African Americans were facing the absolutely crushing realities of Jim Crow laws, sharecropping debt, and just grueling labor in levee camps and lumber yards. The blues evolved right out of that. It became this intense, cathartic release, basically a brand new way for laborers to voice their socioeconomic struggles, turning that heavy burden into something musically powerful. And you can really hear the stark economic realities these early traveling musicians had to deal with just to survive. Just think about this comparison. If they played a black house party, they might walk away with $2, have to buy their own food, and play exhaustingly long sets well past midnight. But if they managed to book a white function, they'd earn $5, get a free plate of food, and be packed up before midnight. So, to make a living, these folks had to master a huge repertoire to appeal to both audiences, constantly code-switching across a fiercely divided society. But the exact moment the commercial power of this music really clicked, that happened in 1903. Picture this. W.C. Handy, a really accomplished black composer, is playing a dance in Mississippi with his 9-piece band. The crowd asks for some local music, which Handy just didn't know. So a local black trio steps up and plays a raw blues song. The white audience went absolutely wild, literally showering the stage with coins. Handy was floored. He watched this local trio scoop up more money in minutes than his entire 9-piece band made the whole night. Right then and there, the commercial viability of the blues was officially discovered.
Section 2. Knocking down the door.
All right, jump to 1924. Paramount Records drops C.C. Rider Blues by Ma Rainey, who is hands down the mother of the blues. Ma Rainey was an absolute powerhouse. Long before this record, she was out there commanding integrated tent shows across the South, packing them to the brim, half the tent for whites, half for blacks. And when she finally hit the studio for this track, guess who was backing her up? A young Louis Armstrong on cornet. It was just a total masterpiece of sorrow, longing, and rage. But you know, the studio doors were actually kicked open a few years prior by another pioneer, Mamie Smith. Back in 1920, she recorded Crazy Blues for OK Records. Remember that 14 million number we talked about? Yeah, it paid off. This record sold over 500,000 copies in a single year. Pullman train porters were buying them up north, sneaking them down south, and selling them for double. Suddenly, rival labels were absolutely scrambling to tap into this brand new race records market. As the source material points out, Smith didn't just open a door, she knocked it down overnight.
Section 3. Building the circuit.
So who actually built the infrastructure for all these live shows? Well, the true godfather of the Chitlin circuit was a guy named Denver Ferguson. He started out as a rural Kentucky boy with a printing press. He moves to Indianapolis, uses that press to run a highly lucrative, though, completely illegal underground numbers game. Then he and his brother C funnel that street money into legitimate real estate, building up the black community. They open an upscale spot called the Cotton Club and eventually launch a massive booking agency. Denver basically built an entertainment empire from the ground up just to support this music on the road. And let me tell you, booking bands in the segregated South was a total logistical nightmare. Big city venues up north, they had indoor plumbing, air conditioning, guaranteed union pay, but Chitlin circuit joints were a completely different universe. We're talking wooden outbuildings past the town limits, no plumbing, blistering heat with nothing but giant garage fans, and the pay was entirely unpredictable, just whatever they collected at the door. Musicians were squeezed into tiny corners, playing for hours. It was incredibly grueling, dangerous work. To actually make this chaotic web of juke joints safe and profitable, Denver Ferguson did something pretty brilliant. Musician and promoter Sax Kari pointed out that Ferguson united all these scattered, independent shadow promoters across the South. By organizing guys like Tom Wintz in Mississippi and Don Roby in Texas into one cohesive network, Ferguson made sure that when a black band went on tour, the whole thing was booked safely in advance. He literally created a protected pipeline for black art.
Section 4. The Midget Maestro.
Now, the guy who arguably did the most legwork to actually map out this circuit early on was Walter Barnes. People affectionately called him the Midget Maestro. Barnes was this sharply dressed, super ambitious bandleader from Vicksburg, Mississippi who had moved up to Chicago. He led a massive swing band called the Royal Creolians. His huge break came when he became the bandleader at Al Capone's Cotton Club in Chicago. Now get this, when a radio station manager denied Barnes a live broadcast because they didn't air colored bands, Capone personally walked right into that station and intimidated the manager into changing his mind. So yeah, thanks to the mob, Barnes became the first African-American band to broadcast live in Chicago.
But you know, when Capone goes to prison and the Great Depression hits, that big Chicago money dried up fast. Barnes had to get creative. He happened to have a column in the Chicago Defender, a major black newspaper. And he used this absolutely brilliant grassroots strategy. He told traveling bands, hey, I'll give you free publicity in my column, but only if you trade me road intelligence, meaning the locations of safe dance halls, honest promoters, friendly places to stay. Through this exchange, Barnes managed to map out the strolls, the thriving black main streets across the Deep South, effectively plotting the exact coordinates of the Chitlin Circuit.
Section 5. Tragedy at Rhythm Club.
We need to talk about April 1940. Barnes and his Kings of Swing were playing a baby doll dance at the Rhythm Club in Natchez, Mississippi. And the physical setup of this place was just a recipe for absolute disaster. It was a wooden frame building lined with tin. For decoration, they hung dried Spanish moss from the rafters, and they actually spritzed it with kerosene to keep the mosquitoes away. On top of that, to stop people from sneaking in without paying, the promoters boarded up the windows and barricaded every single door except the front entrance. On the circuit, this terrifying trap was known as a toilet setup.
At 11:30 p.m., the band is playing a tune called Clarinet Lullaby. Near that one single exit door, a scuffle breaks out, and suddenly, a fire ignites. Now, in these wooden tinder boxes, small fires actually weren't that uncommon, and patrons would usually just stomp them right out. But because that decorative moss hanging overhead was soaked in kerosene, the flames just shot across the ceiling with terrifying speed. The crowd completely panicked, rushing toward that one unboarded exit. Barnes and his band were set up at the very back of this deep room, so they instantly knew they had no way out. But rather than panic, Barnes fell back on his years playing those mobster clubs. He knew that music could soothe chaos. So amidst the screaming and the suffocating smoke, Barnes bravely directed his band to play a lilting Irving Berlin tune called Marie. He was desperately trying to calm the crowd even as the flames were closing in on the stage.
With their final breaths, the band just played on until the tin roof collapsed. Over 200 people died that night, including Walter Barnes and almost his entire band. At his funeral in Chicago, Reverend Junius Austin delivered this haunting quote, literally comparing Barnes and his men to the heroic musicians on the Titanic, who went down still playing. The fire was an unspeakable tragedy, no doubt about it, but it immortalized Walter Barnes, and the incredible tour route that he helped map, that survived him.
The lasting legacy.
When you look at the big picture, we can trace a direct evolutionary line for this sound. What started as West African work songs in the late 1800s evolved into the 1920s blues and race records, which then fueled the 1940s big band swing that was tearing through the Chitlin Circuit. This intense, live crucible forced musicians to constantly innovate. Out of those hot, crowded wooden juke joints emerged wailing saxophones, electric guitars, and these incredibly charismatic frontmen. It was the exact formula that birthed rhythm and blues and ultimately the rock and roll we know today.
Which leaves us with this final thought. When you listen to music today, whether you're into rock, pop, hip-hop, or R&B, you are hearing the echoes of Denver Ferguson's hustle, Ma Rainey's defiance, and Walter Barnes's unbelievable bravery. So, I have to ask you, how much of your favorite playlist today owes its very existence to the sacrifices and the unyielding spirit of these backroad pioneers? Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I really hope you never hear your favorite songs the same way again.